It's been a year since the release of No Man's Sky, and I thought it'd be interesting to take a look back on the game over the past year to see everything that's happened in regards to the whole state of affairs, and discuss the game overall. But in all honesty, besides the 2 updates, not much else has happened, besides another year flying by quick. In this time we have received 2 major free updates to the game: the Foundation update, released November 2016, and the Pathfinder update, released March 2017. The Foundation update brought quite a lot of content to the game, in the form of different game modes, base building, farming, and owning a freighter, to name a few. It gave a lot of things to the game that had been suggested by reviewers that essentially would give more of a reason to gather materials than just gathering them to upgrade your equipment to gather more materials, not to mention making it towards the centre of the galaxy or following the Atlas in the meantime. The Pathfinder update basically fine-tuned this, added a few more little features like seeing how well you're doing with a faction, as well as a permadeath game mode, and more trophies. Whether or not they're free because they chose this, or they feel some sense of obligation is one thing, but the fact that they're free at all is very appreciated, despite the fact that paid DLC was spoken about at one point, which I doubt anybody would have bought anyway. Now, the 2 free updates in a progressively cynical and penny-pinching industry where a gun skin costs $2 is nothing to laugh at, and it is welcomed, but the whole entity of No Man's Sky is a bizarre one. The game still feels fundamentally at odds with itself. I always feel like I'm running out of something I need, and the thing I need for the quest I'm doing, or the thing I'm upgrading, is nowhere to be found, and by the time I do find it, I've forgotten what I needed it for, especially because I can only pin one crafting item at a time. I found a Magmox once. I never found a single use for it, but I didn't want to get rid of it because I probably needed it for something, but then that's just an inventory slot just sitting there being hogged up by a seemingly useless item, and you don't have much space to spare for the plethora of items you do actually need. Upgrading items seems to take a while, but given how this is a game with that as a major focus, it makes sense. It's just a pain given the item management with the small space. Or, for example, how you need to go through 3 final materials to get fuel for the warp drive. Why? Those other items are probably used for other material recipes, but it's all just a hassle. Or how all quests from Foundation are interlinked, that is to say, a reward item I get for one quest is the item needed to build something to help for another quest, or at least this is how it seems so far. I haven't even begun to farm anything yet. It tells me to place a farm area, and I have, and it just stops. But to even begin this chain of events you need to find a ridiculously rare item, this time it was a sack venom, for my first quest, that I only found thanks to my sister, who spent about 30 minutes in the space station talking to vendors that flew in. Ironically, this happened whilst I was writing this video. I think the life support restore item should be basic iron, which is used for a lot else anyway. All the yellow can get confusing as a lot of mini management needs to be done, especially in the heat of combat. In these instances, I usually just spam the items I have until I'm better, probably using something I wanted to keep. Combat has gotten better, but I still find myself flying back to the planet I've just left if the space pirates show up, because that is still the optimal solution, which isn't good. Trying to find life support items like zinc and thallium-9 is a lot more difficult than it should be, and plutonium should be in greater supply. You might argue that this is what a real planet would be like, which is a fair point, but there's always an anxiety lingering that I'll run out of essential items, and having to manage essential items and things you want to collect is a challenge. You can find both of these as well as other essentials and some rarer items in orbit of a planet, sure, but I'm always worried that I'm going to run out of both of these in my travels, and it's always on the back of my mind, so I stay close to my ship just in case I can't find items to restore myself or if a storm rolls in. And even then, if you end up on a planet with 0 plutonium left, you can't access those in orbit anyway. You could say you should have been prepared, but still. It's just when I do find some plutonium or thallium-9, I have a great sense of relief and take as much as I can. Zinc was never as much of an issue, just more difficult than I'd expect. There are alternatives to regaining life support, but you need to craft items for those, and they're never usually as powerful as raw materials would be anyway. However, this type of feeling could be how others feel in these types of games, but they probably have better storage than this one. Landing somewhere on a planet is a crapshoot at best, as if you land with your last thrust of fuel, you'd better hope there's some plutonium around or if you're going to be there a while. All of these points could be countered with, it's realistic, and while that isn't wrong, it's just so many small annoyances piled up. Landing on a launch pad is a good thing as it's automated, and you can see the arrows pointing to it, so you know that you're safe to do so, and it doesn't use any fuel when you take off the next time. Each takeoff costs 25% of fuel. Given how this game is set up and how not great the camera is in these scenarios, like space combat, this system works. Although you can look around in the cockpit, and it isn't as stiff as people claim. You can look down somewhat to do it yourself, but the arrows are a nice helpful aid, as I'm sure missing it by a few centimetres would be annoying otherwise. Which leads me to my next issue, is that the scanner hardly ever seems to work. It tells me that items are really far in the distance, but won't scan things that are right behind me or a short distance away right in front of me. Perhaps that it's so close to me it doesn't feel like it needs to tell me, because I can see them myself, but this feels indicative of the entire game, where everything in this game just feels a little far out of reach. The whole point of the game is to explore, correct? But everything just feels too big and my experience feels hindered by points I've made earlier. It's fun to follow all the space anomaly icons that show up, and I understand they've tried to create planets to some sort of realistic size, but tell me, how much of a planet have you actually explored? It's probably less than 1%, not to mention the fact that you can only see 6 waypoint markers of places you've been to, but have multiple pages for the flora and fauna you've seen. Why? This really kills my reason to explore after finding 6, and I made that a goal on each planet just so I have a variety of images of my experience. And why can't I scan little rocks, especially ones that seem to be blue? Despite this, the size, scope and look of the game is fantastic. It's truly commendable what such a small studio was able to do, don't get me wrong, despite what I just said. Not to mention how excellent and evocative the music is, especially the variations of the opening menu screen. And while the soundtrack does have pre-recorded tracks, some of them are procedural too, I've heard, changing to the moment and splicing sections together, but I remember seeing a YouTube comment last year saying how someone stayed on their original starter planet and found everything they needed to and borderline maxed out everything. Of course there's no way to prove that this is true, but I have a feeling if you spend long enough looking over every crack on a planet, you'll find what you're looking for. So, do we explore all these planets or just jump to each new one when we can to view the new sites and hopefully find a more plentiful planet with what we need? I guess Mario was right.
It's full of choices.
I've only ever found all the animals 4 times, and one of them was in the span of 5 minutes. It was 9 species, a medium number as I've seen planets of more or less, but my sister actually found them this time. I was with her at the time and she seems to be my good lucky charm with this game. I was so shocked that she found at least half in quick succession that I filmed that last part, and then after I did she found the rest. What a shock. I haven't even found all the animals on my home base moon, and that's only 8. I've seen planets that have 6 and still no luck. I better get searching then. I used to think the completion number on the menu was in relation to everything you find, but it's just the animals, which is a little bit more bearable. Another key feature is to collect, yes? Then why am I running out of space every 5 minutes, a common complaint of the game, and why is the last animal usually always the one that's nowhere to be found? In the DLC they've created solutions to these problems in the form of vehicles for better exploration and a freighter for storage, but I'm nowhere close to getting either of those. This is mostly due to lengthy quest requirements I've mentioned previously for the vehicles, but the freighters are just expensive, and from what I've heard, not that great a storage or base builder they make. Can you call it in at any time to dump off materials? I'm still looking forward to this as some sort of in-game goal for myself though. Speaking of which, as I've mentioned previously, in the Foundation update it's hard to even do some of the quests because of the rarity of some of the items, which you pretty much have to be lucky enough to stumble across them in the first place, and they kind of feel like a way to get away with saying there's more gameplay than there actually is. The base system is needlessly complex with many of its unique items for construction that you only seem to get through completing these quests, which makes sense, but I guess I just need to wait. With the Pathfinder update you can visit other players' bases and get a trophy for it, but good luck doing any of that though and getting 100%, as the chances of running into someone else's base, as well as the planet someone else has been on, is incredibly low. At least you can get a platinum by yourself. Are you beginning to notice a problem here? I know the last part of the video just seemed like a run-on list of complaints, but I wanted to illustrate how far the issues run deep with this game. I don't want them to make it easier by taking out life support or making plutonium be everywhere like carbon is, because there's no fun in that, although it would help people's claims that this is the game to relax. But there's creative mode for that now. But once again, I just think this entire game model is at odds with itself, and overall, asks a lot of the player, especially for a game that many call boring. It's just silly little things like how your ship becomes out of range very quickly, so you can't use it as backup storage if you're too far away, which means you are discouraged from exploring too far, unless your exosuit has lots of room, not to mention how long it takes to get anywhere anyway, which they fixed themselves with the vehicles. You could ask, why does a feature of it being out of range even exist in the first place? Or the suit upgrades to store more materials, when you do find them, get progressively more expensive to buy. This makes sense progression wise, but at the same time, the item you need for the entirety of the core of the gameplay costs what you just spent your last hour and a half mining and selling to acquire. And there will be a limit to how many times your suit can upgrade anyway due to screen real estate, unless you can scroll the screen around, which I doubt. Not to mention how your upgrades and materials take up the same storage spaces for both ship and suit. So all this seems somewhat counterproductive. Shouldn't the storage be a key feature of a game where you collect things? It's all little problems here and there, but they add up over time, and it's just death by 1,000 cuts overall. It seems like they're trying to find solutions to their own problems they've made themselves. Do I have some solutions to counteract my analysis? Sure. I have some small solutions here and there, like how there should be an on-screen prompt of when you have enough materials for a crafting item, because they can't expect you to remember all of this. and because you only pin one item at a time, like I've mentioned. It wouldn't be too intrusive, because there's already other on-screen prompts and images when things occur. They could also implement a way to see more waypoint markers, and actually be able to see them fully, like with the flora and fauna, instead of just the small boxes. And what about a small mini-map that just shows the general area of flora and fauna as well, just so it doesn't break the exploration factor of the game? Some may feel that this would break the point of the game, but given how huge the game actually is, this would help. Or how, instead of having one planet have rare items everywhere, why not spread them more evenly? This may have something to do with the procedural generation of the game as a whole, but then that could cause a whole bunch of other problems as well. For example, you need special tools to mine certain rocks, but these rocks are rare, and I don't have access to any of the equipment yet, so what am I to do? Stall my journey so I can hopefully maybe grind for an item from a vendor at the space station after 30 minutes? Or carry on, well past this planet with the rock and hopefully get lucky again? Again, I think the problem is with the game they've created overall, and no small tweaks will fix this. It either needs to be properly gutted, which is good or bad thing depending on how you look at it, with games being changed forever via online patches, or how unlikely this is, fixed in a sequel. Either way you look at it, this new barrier of needing new equipment to mine things is a problem they've introduced themselves because of the new base building quests. Being limited and having to work for items isn't a bad thing, but I'm pretty sure my weapons vendor has the thing I need, as I've already gotten one helpful new mining item from the quest I did for him. But that already took long enough to acquire because I needed something from someone else first, which is the case for this time as well. A few more things to mention before we move on is that I don't actually have an issue with the Sentinels. Whilst they may be especially annoying when you pick up a very rare item on a planet because they attack you from that point on, that's usually okay, because in my experience those planets have usually been barren anyway, and you can run away from them easily every time they show up, which will be a lot after that, usually resulting in your leaving before long. But I do have an issue when they're just overly aggressive for no reason and attack me as soon as I land. I understand they're there to be some sort of in-game challenge, which is fine, but isn't the point of the game to, once again, explore? Why would you hinder that by basically forcing me off the planet? However, this is just one setting I've encountered rarely, so it's fine for variety's sake. And besides this, in normal gameplay, they aren't very bothersome at all. To come to the game's defence for a moment, I have found mostly water planets, but there still needs to be some land so you have somewhere to put your ship, unless there was some function to do otherwise. I've also found some desolate sand-looking planets, but nothing like the sand planet that was advertised at the time. I also don't have a problem with finding things that already have names. People think this takes away from the experience if you're supposed to be finding these and they already have names, but I disagree. This might be a blasphemous response, but isn't it the same in Pokemon? In the originals at least, you're tasked with finding Pokemon, but they already have names and descriptions about them. You could say you're discovering them for yourself, but in No Man's Sky you're doing similar things, and you can at least rename everything if you want to make it yours. And you're actually exploring these places for the first time, so you are the first one to see them. Even Hello Games don't know the final result of everything they've made. You can give a Pokemon a nickname as well, but you know. Most of the names they offer are much like the entire game as a whole, randomly generated. Not to mention that you can rename your ship now too. Overall, once again, I think it's the entire game model that's at fault, as all these individual factors I've mentioned seem to clash with one another. It's such a great engine though. It feels like everything exists but doesn't at the same time, because it hasn't been made yet. But because it's online, and if somebody else has already gone there, then it has. It's such a great system. It's probably a lot simpler than I think it is, but it's very impressive. Although I think the initial load screen is a bit longer now, but that's okay because of the engine, and that's pretty much the only loading screen in the game. The others are just when you warp to and from your base, and when you enter a new system. However, there is one question that comes to my mind when I think of this game, and that's, why? Why was this the game to finally start a virtual crusade against pre-orders and game hype leading to letdown? This could have been the final straw for people, an unfairly directed final straw maybe, but it had been building up for a while with the likes of Infinite Warfare. Why was this game hyped by Sony to be completely dropped more or less after the negative reception came in? Did they not know what Hello Games were making? Did that final delay have something to do with it? Do people have a right to complain and sell a copy of a game they don't like? Of course. But the way people reacted to this game is like this is the first time it's ever happened in the industry. Have we all forgotten about Destiny? Well, it seems so, because the second one is out soon, and people seem to have already forgotten that we've been down this road before. And there have apparently been issues with the beta for that game already. Off to a great start, aren't we? What happened to that 10-year game plan? I knew it wouldn't happen, but also because it came out on the PS3 and 360 too. It's like we've been conditioned to accept this, but for No Man's Sky people seem to break free of the trance. To use another example, people talk about how bad the Dishonored 2 and Mirror's Edge Catalyst launches were, to the point of it being so bad that it ruined the game's reputation and series forever, apparently. But what about Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight? Those were debatably worse, with Knight being taken down from Steam for a time, and Warner Brothers also saying they don't care to fix them, but will make DLC, and that series still went strong, as did others. Is it because Warner Brothers can afford it? Is it because it's Batman, so it's okay? Is it because they gave out free Arkham games to make up for it? Is it because Hello Games are a smaller company? Or is it because this game was propped up far higher than it should have been, and people's expectations were unrealistic maybe? I never want to jump on a bandwagon. I always want to step back and work things out rationally, but it doesn't help that Hello Games ended up being one of the least transparent companies going. We all know of their infamous silence on Twitter after the game came out for a few months, where the only person to make a comment on the game sometime later was the composer for the soundtrack, and the whole No Man's Sky was a mistake Twitter hack incident. At least, however, they did update the game constantly to fix bugs and crashes, even if they were silent on social media. So that's something, even if it didn't do them much favours. But all the negative feedback could have been quelled somewhat if they just kept up a dialogue with people. That would have helped tremendously. Some said if they released a video statement after the whole Twitter hack, that would have helped also. However, some also say that because they were silent, it's proof that there was drama behind the scenes, and they knew they messed up. It's a very bizarre state of affairs. I think they went silent because they had absolutely no idea what to do, and kinda wanted things to hopefully calm down on their own, although that's not the ideal way to deal with things. But unless they tell us, which is doubtful, we will never know. It's sad really. I recently saw a retrospective again of a 2013 award game show, and No Man's Sky had a trailer and they said it was the best of show. Even before then I saw an image saying how No Man's Sky won E3 every year from now on, and it's just sad to see how far the game has come and gone. Ah, the power of hype. We just have no idea what happened in development, and it's just amazing how a game that had everything going for it, at least for a few years, lost it all within a couple of weeks. Although I do think Hello Games were under some unfair pressure from fans. Now don't get me wrong, I think some of this was self-inflicted as Sean Murray just seemed to be so enthusiastic and didn't have an editor or a PR guy to help him out on what to say. And the behind the scenes mishaps and radio silence didn't help. I also think fans' hype for the game, when they really had no idea exactly what No Man's Sky was, all the way up until release, didn't help. It also doesn't help when they have people sending death threats via Twitter, which is already bad enough. But to people for just reporting on things like the game being delayed, saying things like this will change the game industry and I live for this game. What game? You didn't even know what you did in the game. But I don't think they were out to mislead people. I think they just had visions that either they couldn't reach or had troubles behind the scenes, as the game looked really different just a few months before release and that final delay. I mean, why would they knowingly mislead people? It has been done before by others, but what would they get out of it? It isn't like Call of Duty where they know people will buy it anyway. There was an extensive list on Reddit of missing features, but again, I don't think that it was intentional. I had a theory once they just wanted to get as much money as they could then leave the industry, but that isn't a long-term goal. I still think they were unfairly propped up beyond their means by Sony, and the fact they completely distanced themselves after it got average feedback is unfair, but they still had a PC base to help them. And it's not fair how Murray became the face of No Man's Sky and Hello Games to the public, to the point of him being blamed for everything wrong with the game. Perhaps it's the fact that I didn't follow the hype, but I just see an untested developer making a big project far removed from their previous games, and then being propped up by Sony. Although there is a lot of drama between those two companies as well, and that isn't all too clear either. I had only seen a few clips prior to release, and I think it was midway in 2015. When I heard it was an infinite universe, I thought that this was the power of the next-gen consoles, and my mind went wild with possibilities. Although I didn't have a PS4 at the time, so I stopped thinking about it pretty quickly after seeing those clips because I didn't have the console, so I wasn't going to follow something on a console that I didn't have yet. But in retrospect, people have been saying for a long time how underpowered the next-gen consoles are, and even in-game, the engine is probably a lot smaller than I imagine it to be. But the term infinite universe does conjure up massive images though, doesn't it? Perhaps the price of the game versus its content caused more of a backlash of this game than the others I mentioned previously, which is fair, and that could be a debate for another video, the whole price versus content debate. But overall, why is mediocrity like the new COD every year celebrated, and new ideas, at least in the mainstream of video game industry, abandoned or forgotten about? People might complain about Call of Duty, but it still sells well, not as much as it has done, but still. Despite the price debate and the missing content which contributed to the backlash, I think it should be commended for trying something different, at least for a mainstream game of this type. It may not have been mainstream previously before Sony, but we're judging it for what it is now. Crafting games are a dime a dozen on the indie scene, and I think if you want to blame anyone for the price, it's probably Sony. People blame Sony for the inflated price as they feel they saw an excuse to cash in on a new IP and hype train, but that backfired, didn't it? For the gamers? And while there may be some merit to that, how does that explain the Steam price? Perhaps this was meant to be indie like Hello Games' previous efforts originally. Like people have said, this would have been an amazing $20–30 game. I think things are moving too far forward in terms of graphics in this industry, to the point where nobody can afford to make games unless it has microtransactions or DLC. It's either that, or they're greedy. It's probably that they're greedy, but the game industry is the only one where it seems like things can be half finished and it's okay. I remember years ago Ubisoft saying that they will only release games they know they can make a profit on. And that's the problem with this industry, like I said. Things are probably too expensive to innovate on a big scale, so they need to release sequels with ever-growing numbers that they know will sell just to keep their doors open. I honestly feel like another video game crash could happen in a few years. Everything in this industry just seems like it will burst at the seams soon. but again, that's a topic for another video. When I played it for the first time, I did enjoy it for what it was, and I played it for a long while. I got it a few weeks after release because I did like what I saw of the game, but there became a point where there was just no meat, for lack of a better term, to cling to. I felt like it was a very laid back, albeit grindy, game, but then I just bought Ratchet & Clank and then the problem was solved. Even with the updates to the game that are great, I still find myself doing the original content that came with the game anyway, despite the fact that quests can be hard to achieve and sometimes through luck of finding a rare item. The overall quality of life of the game has been improved with these updates as well, and it just made it feel less tiresome and just better to play. They've also prettied up the visuals too, both in terms of nice looking planets, and when you fly to a planet the textures don't just phase in before your eyes. I'm not all about graphics, but more inviting colours can always help a game, and people did complain about the phasing in on the planets. Now they just have clouds that obscure your view. And while people who played it before these updates probably know why the clouds are there, those that play it after won't notice. Heck, I don't notice it while I'm playing. It didn't take me out of the experience before, but now it's even better. Did the PS4 version have something to do with a visual downgrade? Why was it actually delayed for a further month? And why did so much change just a month before a delayed release? Why wasn't it on Xbox as well? Sony treated it like a first party title, but it was on PC. I couldn't really find anything concrete, and again, we don't know any of this. After the first update, the planet I was already on had changed from a nice enough green planet to a beautiful jungle, and harkens back to how the promotional videos did back in 2015, which, I love those visuals, as they were all bright and vibrant and really made it all feel more like an alien world with less detail. It was great. The next planets I went to weren't as nice, but they were still nice and very abstract and pretty. I've heard that even before these updates, that depending on what colour style you go to is how nice the planet will be. Some argue that this goes against the random procedural generation, but I think if this colour style thing is true, then each colour type would have assets unique to that type and just generate those. Which would make sense because you can see reoccurring assets after a while. These really do make a difference. I can't explain it, but I unknowingly look at footage of No Man's Sky before these updates and I can just tell that they're the old visuals. It just does make everything seem more drab. I don't know how they did it, but congrats to them, because I'm all sure we've seen this video.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
I wouldn't know. The only time I've ever deviated from the path I was following was to discover a new system myself, instead of flying into one that someone else has already discovered, because I noticed in my travels that I couldn't upload my findings if it belonged to someone else, so I couldn't find all the animals as it wouldn't count. As you can see, this could lead to a whole host of other problems with gameplay. It's a pseudo online play that doesn't really work for anyone, which links into bases. Why would someone want to go to a place that someone else has already found, limiting even more the people who could find your base you built? Have a more structured planet system or have worlds for people to interact with, besides the new base system. It's amazing how two people are on the same planet in this game anyway. I guess everyone's starting out in similar spots of the map and worked outwards, which kinda goes back to my point of how the game engine works if people go there before you. I mentioned before how hard it would be to find someone else's base, as well as just now saying I went to a new system just to avoid someone else's discoveries, but that was at the start of the game's life when it had recently just come out. With my theory I mentioned that we all started in similar places and dispersed outwards. A friend of mine started in the Elucid Galaxy, and I don't think I started there. I think I flew into it after a while. Make sure to look out for his planet beepers. The reason I haven't explored differing colour stars, which I forget about the colour thing while I'm actually playing, is because I'm following the Atlas path, and the game map isn't the easiest to navigate at the best of times, so I don't want to go and get lost and then go off the predetermined path it has laid out for me. I managed to find a new one that's still linked to the Atlas path, after I looked for a system that hadn't been discovered, which I'm sure they're probably still connected, but it doesn't seem like it's a free movement of the system as each one is linked in a certain way at the same time. But they have made it easier and better to track your old discoveries and places you've been to, instead of them being erased after 2 weeks, which had been reported. I haven't reached the end, and at the rate I'm going, I doubt I will anytime soon, but my drive to explore and log everything I find is what keeps me going. I like that kind of stuff, especially because I'm mining and selling so I can afford one of the key selling points of the DLC, the freighter, especially because multiple ships would be nice. I do wonder what will happen if I get to the end. I wonder if I have to reset, because that's partly what makes me not want to do it, is because if that's the case, I'd just like to load my old last save and then carry on doing my own thing. Researching for this video somewhat spoiled that for me anyway, but that's understandable. But I still don't have a clear idea of what actually happens at the end. There's at least 2 endings, or one ending to a story path and then going to the centre left for me to play. Going back to my point about asking a lot from the player, this game can be as long or as short as you want it to be, so the fact that I'm on my 3rd Atlas stone after a year and apparently I need 10 of them shows my progress. And apparently you can even do this wrong if you don't get them all. They're very expensive in shops as well. I could blaze through the entire systems with ease as the Atlas gives you what you need to enter warp, but I don't want to rush it for the sake of it. There isn't much of a set in stone story here for you, but many little secrets laid out here and there that you can piece together as you play, and it's quite interesting, if spread out, depending on how you play. But it's more like set dressing to your exploration discovery journey more than anything else. There's also a 3rd option for gameplay: do your own thing. I thought people would make jokes to remember Harambe a year on after that incident occurred, but they didn't, and the same may be the case for No Man's Sky. People might just not care anymore, except the people like us who spend time making and watching videos like this, as well as players increasing when an update occurs. Funny enough, during the writing of this, there's been a new update announced, Waking Titan. Sounds like it's going to hit at the 1 year anniversary, and the name implies it's like the game becoming grand and waking up, if you will. There hasn't been much of an update since the Pathfinder though, and the official last page update was in March. There may have been small bug fixes here and there since then that aren't important enough to put on the site. They have put some major patches up there, and the Foundation update was sneakily put into the 1.1 update, although I can't find that page by itself unless I Google it, because it just jumps to 1.12 on their feed, but we can't expect free additional content all the time, but I'm just mentioning it. All of these update names seem to link with each other, which was the whole idea of the Foundation update to begin with, but please be aware that this video was scheduled to be uploaded exactly after the game's release, but made a few weeks prior to upload. If news has been announced about the update in that time, that is why it hasn't been covered, and I'll probably make a follow-up review in the future regarding this content. I still play the game occasionally and I enjoy it when I do, but this game just reminds me of the games of old, where things had flexibility to be creative because it's what games had the ability to do and were about, like an escape from the real world. It's like a 90s game of fantasy actually, flying from planet to planet and exploring alien worlds, and at the core of its gameplay, it's perfect at this. I also feel that once I get the ball rolling with quests, it will become faster and easier as I'll have access to the vehicles, which are bigger than I thought and in 3rd person, as well as auto mining devices that can do things in the background for me. I still care what happens with this game, and I want this long story to have a happy ending. I don't know how Hello Games has the money for it, given the refunds and the continued effort to make DLC, not to mention the flood. I'm surprised they didn't have people show up to their building if people knew where it was. And while they're still not active on social media that much, maybe they feel ashamed, but let's just hope it works out in the end. Did the game come out too early? Perhaps, but given its long development time and behind the scenes mishaps, it's, once again, hard to know what actually happened. At least they seem to be fixing it now, and I don't think they were out to lie to people. All I have to finalise this is, if they tried something and it went wrong for a long time during development or that final delay, then I understand. But if they rushed it out at the last minute, which I doubt, given how long it was in development, then they don't get any sympathy, even if they were using pre-made demos of planets at events. But the entire concept of the game is excellent, but it still feels like it has so much more potential to be the best of itself. I've probably left something out, but if you want to know something, just ask in the comments below. And let's talk about No Man's Sky. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, favourite and subscribe, and hit that bell icon to stay up to date on all of our content. Until next video guys.